Oh, it's okay. Not yet.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Marty Keller here with my friend and comrade in the intentional living work, Dan Gutierrez. Both of us recording this in Sacramento, California, and part of our ongoing intentional living podcasts. We have some with John Donovan, and now Dan and I have started this particular version of this as well. And this particular focus we have here is based on quote that Dan found from an ancient Greek philosopher named Socrates. Many of us have heard of him. And what he said was the secret of change is to focus all of our energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Focus all of our energy not on fighting the old, but building the new. And part of the reason that this is important in the intentional living work, from my perspective, is that um, we are here to create the lives that we want to live and liberating ourselves from compulsions and behaviors that our conscious minds say we don't want to have, and yet they show up anyway. And so the focus for us here in this particular podcast is creating that new world. And obviously, in order to do that, we're not going to ignore our history. We're not going to ignore the childhood trauma that all the stuff began with, but our focus is identifying and working with all of that in order to create something that's really out of our heart's deepest desires. So it was our friend and mentor John Donovan who taught us all of this. And one of the things that John talks about, Dan, is he talks about the five constants of relationship. It used to be four, but there's a fifth one, and we're going to talk about that fifth one today. And
Okay.
the five constants are I've got them here: focus attention, own my projections, move toward my pain, question the story, and today I intend to. So
Correct.
these are we explain these in different ones of our podcasts, but today we want to talk about question the story. And this is a late addition. It used to be four constants, but now John has added question the story. So we thought it would be a good idea to explore what that means and how does questioning the story help us build the future that we say we want. So let's just start out, Dan, and share with us, if you would, your interpretation or understanding of what is the story that we're talking about and why should we question it?
Um, the purpose of questioning the story is realizing that I have a story. And what story am I talking about? I'm talking about the story that manifests itself in the results that I have in my life. When I question the story, it I'm questioning whatever it is I'm telling myself. I can't. I'm not good enough. Nobody loves me. I have to be something other than myself to be accepted. Um, any myriad of story that I tell myself. Um, I'll never be able to. I'm not good at this. I'm afraid of people. Um, people don't like me. I'm not worthy. Um, those kinds of things. Well, how do I know what the story is?
Well,
Well,
first of all,
anytime.
before we go to that, could you elaborate? Is that
Go ahead.
from the perspective of our work? Is that something that we're conscious of, or is that something with a little bit less awareness for us?
Well, in the beginning, it's something that I've been telling myself so often and so frequently that it's like me breathing. I don't really notice that I'm doing it, but it's
Right.
there. And a lot of times it requires some outside intervention or outside insight. That's a good phrase. I like that. Outside insight. Okay. Um, to go, hey, I hear you repeating that same story all the time. Every time you face a challenge, you say oh, I can't do that, or hey, let's double date tonight, and it's like, oh, nobody would like me. No, I can't go. Those kinds of things. And those do come. The manifestation of that story comes from childhood. Um, they're they're the stories that we learned in childhood to connect us to stay connected in our primary attachment relationships. I had to give up something of myself to stay in relationship to my parents, whoever. So if I had to become the dumb one, uh, people kept telling me or repeating over and over that, you're dumb, you'll never figure it out. Well, eventually I begin to believe the story. I become the dumb one. I become the scapegoat. I become whatever it is that I tell myself, or I become to maintain attachment. That becomes my story.
So
Uh,
essentially, what you're saying is this is a belief that gets developed um, not out of our own internal experience, but by virtue of what we're hearing and the way we're forced to react to what we're hearing. And so
and then yes,
it's
and
like
then we become the orator of the story.
yeah,
That's the background voice. Anytime something happens, that's the first thing we hear. It's that voice that says, "Don't do it. You're not smart enough."
right.
Uh, to- who do
So
you
it's
think
like
you are?
it's kind of like a computer program. It's someone programmed it, and then it takes a life of its own.
Yes,
It keeps running in the background, and we refer to it, we believe it, we act upon it as if it's true. And the
right,
more we do it, the more we kind of keep the programming in place. We
right.
reinforce it. It's
It
sort of
becomes a survival mechanism, and we
yeah,
don't realize it.
right.
And the story never gets an update. When we get out of childhood, and get past age 7, for most of us, we don't remember. We have no clue of the programming. And what happens is there's never an update. So we carry the old programming, the story about who we are in our place in the world into adulthood, and we begin to act and manifest to create that story because we believe it's true.
Yeah. And that's what we see.
Right.
It shows up outside of us as if it's out there and objectively true. As you were talking, I was thinking about when I was a kid. Um, the story I had was I was kind of the egghead dingbat kid, and I found when I went to school that I would see things differently from other people, and people would kind of avoid me, and so I kept proving grade after grade as I got into high school that I was kind of the egghead kid that saw things differently from other people, and it was kind of weird, and didn't have a lot of friends, and so clearly that was a story I was telling myself without any contradiction. No, no
No.
evidence to the contrary would change my mind. It wouldn't even take in my awareness, or I would
Right.
just dismiss it, or oh, that was an accident, or that won't happen again, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I the one I remember the most, that was the story that I told is that my childhood was normal, you know, and there was nothing wrong with my childhood. Everybody I knew lived the same childhood, so therefore, um, all children's childhoods are the same. And that story I kept telling myself was a way for me not to experience that my childhood was not quote unquote normal. So right? I just ignored anything to the contrary. The story was I had a normal childhood. What happened in my childhood does not affect me as an adult. And so I just kept with that story. And through a sponsor, um, we sat down and contrary to the story, um, she asked me some questions and asked me how many times I can remember moving. And at the end of the tally there, I had moved somewhere between 12 and 15 to 16 times. And at the time,
All as a kid.
yes, all as a kid. And what I do know at that point, I did know that's a very traumatic thing for a kid to go through. And then it became, this is contrary to the story that I'm telling myself. So, oh well, I'm still in denial and eventually we get to the point here. It's like question the story, not in um, a, a Judge Judy type of question the story, but more of a compassionate inquiry to, is the story really true?
So
And
all that moving you were doing was because your dad was in the military,
correct.
and so you were just surrounded by people who had that same experience. So therefore, you
Therefore,
assumed,
the story is true.
right?
There's Everybody else had this childhood. It's not abnormal. Yeah, my normal was that everybody moved all the time, and everybody did it. So therefore, well, what's the big deal? It's normal.
And so I would
Uh,
assume also that part of that story was that it was easy, and that you probably didn't compare notes with kids that you were meeting for the first time in the military and say, God, that really was awful. You probably didn't talk to each other that way.
no, we all had the same experience.
Right. And you all
Um,
sucked it up and pretended like it was, natural and easy and,
exactly.
like you said,
Everybody
normal.
does it, so don't complain about it,
Right.
and it's normal, and just get through it. And it's like, well, okay. So, but anyway, that's an example of this question the story. So as an adult now, the benefit is that we all have a story. Nobody doesn't have one. What we can do is with this information is to question the story, question my beliefs. Like I said, not in a antagonistic, prosecutorial way.
Prosecutorial, yeah.
Yeah, not that way, but as a compassionate inquiry, is like, is that true? I started question the story, which is another way of saying question your beliefs. Um, and after you develop the ability to question the story, what am I telling myself? I created intentions. I intend to listen to what I say. I I don't just speak it, regurgitate it over and over and over. Uh, Listen to what I say and then pay attention and question the story. Um, or another story was that I work well under pressure. I require high levels of stress to function at my best. That was the story I told myself, and I lived that story. I
And
would wait until
I
the
could
last.
see, I'm sorry, Dan, but I could see how that would come right out of your childhood story.
Exactly. And then it was like, okay, so well that dictated my behavior. So I wouldn't study until 1 or 2 days before the final, and I had to do a semester's worth of cramming into 2 days. But boy, was I stressed! And amazingly enough, the results of the test proved the story. I got good enough grades to pass. So I don't know, 10 years ago, I was going to college, and I go, there's just got to be a better way. It's nerve-wracking. And so I started questioning the story. Is this the best way for me to study? And the answer is no. I'm addicted to the adrenaline. To have to do something, which is exactly the same chemicals that were in my childhood. No, I don't perform better when I have massive amounts of pressure. I can function, but not at my best. So that was another one of those things. It's like I'm not a stress junkie. I my body and I like adrenaline, and I have that confused with performance. And it's just like, you know, nobody performs well under duress. Some people do better than others, but if they're under duress, they're not stressed out and adrenalized. They're calm. They just have developed the ability to function there. Um, but optimizing that under high levels of anxiety and stress, that doesn't produce good results.
Okay, so
That
let's focus in then on, so what's the value for the future that we want to create of questioning the story? What particularly in the context of the accountability tree practice that you and I work on so regularly?
So if I don't understand that I have a story and then listen to my story and question the story and ask the question, is it true? And it gets further ingrained as a belief, and it becomes harder and harder to change. This is why it's hard to create change. Our neural pathways have been so ingrained that those thoughts have the path of least resistance, so they quickly and easily come together in our brains because we've done them over and over and over and over and over. And it's very hard to change. Uh, those stories become my beliefs of reality, and I function as a creator, and I will create my world to match those beliefs and fulfill that story. I will I will hire people. I will be in relationship with people who support the story. Um, One of the stories was, I until I understood that it was a story I was telling myself. It was like all the women I attract are crazy, or all women are crazy because those were because the women I was meeting were crazy. The truth was the story becoming aware of all the women that I attract are crazy. Not all women crazy. That was the story. Based on what I learned, I'm the one who attracts crazy women. And with that awareness, what kind of women do I want to attract? Uh, I intend to be peaceful, joyous, and safe. All right. So the majority of the people or women that I've been attracting in my life have been that. Since that moment, I realized that the story I've been telling is that all women are crazy. And no, the
So
real story is
basically what you're saying is that when I can identify the story I'm telling myself, I can begin to liberate myself from it,
right.
because I begin that process of objectifying that which felt like a subjective truth, something that felt, uh, let's go to the word you used about your childhood, it felt normal. That the story, that the endless evidence of our eyes that, let's say, all women that show up in my life are crazy, proves that my story is accurate, and I don't have a story, that's actually the way the world is.
Correct.
So the minute I can take a step back and say, this a truth, or is just a belief, a narrative, a story, a concept, and I can start probing into that, then maybe I can actually begin to understand that I'm telling myself a story and that it's a story that, because it got invented once, can be reinvented. But
Right,
this time by conscious intention, rather than as a defense of some poor little kid who had no choice. It was
right,
just in order to stay in some kind of sense of safety. We invented these stories. It's almost like that original story that we were telling ourselves was like a security blanket that we could cling to find some anchor in a wild and stormy and crazy world.
right,
So now, with the accountability practice, um, we get help. I I, I know that we both got help from John in beginning to see what our stories were, because when we started this work, I didn't have a story. I just had problems. And so, once I was able to get some help taking a look at, so that's part of why we invite people to participate in our group sessions, because the in my case, John could see the story I was telling myself that I couldn't see for myself. And he wasn't emotionally invested in keeping that story true. Um,
right,
and so he could very gently and yet firmly suggest that I might take a look at this. And out of that compassionate mirroring, we could say, John was mirroring for me, or perhaps other people in the group. Once John pointed it out, other people in the group could offer their observations of how they saw that operating in me as well. I could
right.
begin to I could begin to like loosen that grip that that story had on my psyche and consider a different possibility. And so for me, the value of questioning the story is that it has the possibility of helping me see that it's just a story. It's not a capital T truth of my life. It's something that um, is subject to revision or rewriting. And in
Right.
our work, through the power of intention, and you've said that several times during the podcast, we can create a new story, and we're still going to have story, um,
Right.
but this time it's a story that we've freely and consciously chosen to have. And because I continue to do this work in meetings, group meetings, and individual meetings, I have whatever this new story I've told myself. I'm surrounded by people who can help me see whether I'm letting the story become kind of ossified like it did as a kid, or whether I can continuously refresh the story as new evidence of things that I want to have in my life manifest themselves.
Yeah. The good part, like you're saying, is that we're all on a journey, and when I understand that I have a story or a narrative or a belief around, like I said, myself, the way the world works, my value in it, um, then I could. It's an awareness. I can start to pay attention, uh, to listen to my story. Listen to how I talk about myself. What is this? What is it? The theme that gets constantly and pervasively repeated. Now that I have a conscious awareness that I'm paying attention to how I everything a challenge that comes up or something that comes into my life, and the first thought I have is, oh, I can't or I shouldn't. Um, I don't want to meet people. What's the story I'm telling myself? Well, I'm not sociable. I don't get along with people. Um, for me, that was
I don't know how to be in relationship.
exactly. Um, but the the good part about this is that the story becomes the uh, the mechanism which I create change with. If I realize that I have a story and that I've been believing that story for a long time. Um, One thing I've learned to do is that I may have been the victim of my story as we realize that, I do have a story and I've been acting and behaving and manifesting my life based on that story. So recognizing that I have a story and that I can change the story. I no longer am the victim to the story. I can change the story and become the hero in my life. I could celebrate my life now that I understand that I have this piece of information. As with all of what we learned to become accountable for through the accountability practice, it's a piece of information. Like I'm arrogant, uh, I'm entitled, I'm needy. These all become points of shift when I can be accountable for them. And same thing with the story. The story is my gateway to the life that I want. And then I can start telling a new story where I'm going to use the word hero again, where I triumph over, or I have the power to create the life that I want by telling myself the new story.
I heard you once refer to, I think it's Joseph Campbell, who talks about the hero's journey. Because the hero's journey, I mean, do you agree? The hero's journey is a story too.
Yes, well, we all have our story in the hero's journey. We discover our story. We in his motif or his story, we 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 move through life. We have challenges. We overcome, and then we slay our dragons. That our fears. And when we slay our dragon, that's part of overcoming the old story. I couldn't. I don't know how. I'm afraid. And then we have this moment where we transition from the old story and we overcome it and we find out the story is not true. And then we go, well, now that I've overcome this, well, what is the story that I do want to tell myself? I'm capable. I'm worthy. I'm lovable. I'm acceptable. And that's the story that I start to believe. And then and this, like I said, if I believe the story, I will manifest and create my life based on those beliefs that I believe to be true about myself. But if I never ever question my story, I never question the results in my life, I will never have the opportunity to go, is this true? Is this real?
And do I want this?
What it is I really want?
Yeah. Well,
That's what this questioning the story has the power um, through self-examination of the story. What am I telling myself?
yes, our time is coming to an end here. I think that's a really
Oh,
great way to finish finish because the thing that we want to share with everybody here is that the good news is once I can identify that story that a little kid invented as a way of trying to deal with the environment he or she found him or herself in, as with no power to do anything but react. Now, as adults, we actually have that same power that little kid had, only we can direct it consciously. And so what is it that I want to live? What is it that what's the, as we are talking about with the quote from Plato at the beginning of the podcast, what's the future that I want to create? Understanding and acknowledging the story that I told myself in the past allows me to free myself up from that and now create in a glorious and joyful kind of way the story that I want to experience going forward. And then I can continue with that awareness. I can continue to refine that story. Maybe a year from now, I want something different. And so
right.
I'm no longer a prisoner of some subconscious belief that shows up like a compulsion or some weird things going on in me that I can't change. I actually have the power to make something happen differently. And I,
Good.
I, I'm here to testify that's exactly what's happened to me as I've done this work. And I
Uh,
now I set out 3 or 4 years ago to create a world of joy, peace, freedom, community, and health, and that's the world I live in.
Yeah. Well, that's the good news about doing all this work. The power of our thoughts and beliefs are what create our lives. But if I never if I don't know I'm wearing some glasses that limit my vision, I see through this filter of my story. I'm not capable of seeing anything else.
Yeah.
And like you said, through the being in a group where I come and I share my story each week, maybe I have the same issues each week with different people, and having a facilitated meeting where somebody who's paying attention and goes, would you be open to considering that your story is, you know, you don't, you want to live a life of misery. Well, how's that? Well, you never talk about anything else. Well, okay, well, let's talk about that and see what's up going on with that. And in a loving, compassionate way. It's not I'm trying to prove we're not trying to prove anybody wrong,
Right.
but if we don't have the ability to insert some new information, stop the story instead of repeating the story, stop it and listen to ourselves speak about our beliefs about ourselves and the world. We don't have a chance of changing it.
It's our fundamental conviction that nothing's wrong here. This is just what happens. And so yeah, no blame or judgment for any of these things.
No.
And particularly the more I've done this work, I developed compassion for that little guy and for the little me, and the experience that he had to grow up through. It's same with you as a little military kid, always being jerked around and moving and trying to find some way to live with that doesn't freak you out. I mean, that's the way we did it.
Yeah, I developed the story that this is the way life is, and
Right.
everybody's doing it, and this is normal. I don't have a problem. I'm normal.
Exactly. I'm cool.
Yeah, I just have problems with relationships, but it just doesn't come from my.
But that's their fault.
Yeah.
Well,
So cool.
Dan, it's been good as always to hang out with you and talk about some of these things. Next week, we're going to talk about another one of those five constants, moving toward your pain, which
Ah,
uh,
yes.
which is very related to questioning the story, as we'll see. So, um, as we wrap up here, I invite everybody, particularly those of you who are new, to consider coming to one of our meetings. We have 4 meetings a week, spread out around the week in different times, and they're all on Zoom. And information on when and how to join the Zoom meetings will be posted after we finish this conversation. So please come and join us. Check it out. You can participate, or you can just sit back and watch. We don't have rules about that. Well, the rule is it's up to you. You get to decide. So how you want to participate. So with that, Dan, thank you very much, and I
All right. Thanks, Marty.
look forward to the next one.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Take care.